Well, hello there. Hello. I don't know how many people are here. If there is anyone here, I hope so. Um, Let me see if this is working. It is, right? I think I am. I think I am live now. Okay. Well, I hope there's somebody watching. I don't see any comments. I don't know how many people are here. So if there aren't, this video anyway will be online. So maybe you're watching just not at the same time that I'm speaking, right? That you might not be here when I am here, but you are there anyway in the mystery that is time. So, anyway, today we're going to be reading the second chapter of The Lord of the Rings. Yes, The Shadow of the Past that you see right there. Um, what are we going to do today? Give me just one moment so I can verify that everything is working. It seems to be working. Everything seems to be in order. So, okay, let's go. Yeah. Um, I think I'm alone for the moment. So, if anybody shows up or if you're watching this later, know that I will be doing it anyway, even if nobody's watching. So, I hope somebody watches. Um, okay, so The Lord of the Rings, Chapter 2, The Shadow of the Past. I'll wait a few more minutes, actually. Hmm. Okay, so I'll get a glass of water and start reading for who knows who. So, I'm going to be reading the second chapter of The Lord of the Rings. I hope someone joins. Um, Chapter 2, The Shadow of the Past. Um, let's go. The talk did not die down in 9 or even 99 days. The second disappearance of Mr. Baggins was discussed in Hobbiton and indeed all over the Shire for a year and a day, and was remembered much longer than that. It became a fireside story for young hobbits, and eventually Mad Baggins, who used to vanish with a bang and a flash and reappear with bags of jewels and golds, became a favorite character of legend and lived on long after all the true events were forgotten. But in the meantime, the general opinion in the neighborhood was that Bilbo, who had always been rather cracked, had at last gone quite mad and had run off into the blue. There he had undoubtedly fallen into a pool or a river or come to a tragic but hardly an untimely end. The blame was mostly laid on Gandalf. I find it fun that everybody assumes that he drowned, just like his father. I don't know, like that's the Baggins curse. All Bagginses shall die of drowning or something. So yeah, they assume that Baggins is apparently end uh, their lives underwater. Um, but well, let's go on. But in the meantime, the general opinion in the neighborhood was that Bilbo. No, I read that already. Here. If only that dratted wizard will leave young Frodo alone, perhaps he'll settle down and grow some hobbit sense, they said. And to all appearance, the wizard did leave Frodo alone, and he did settle down. But the growth of hobbit sense was not very noticeable. Indeed, he at once began to carry on Bilbo's reputation for oddity. He refused to go into mourning, and the next year he gave a party in honor of Bilbo's 112th birthday, which he called a hundredweight feast. But that was short of the mark, for 20 guests were invited, and there were several meals at which it snowed food and rained drinks, as hobbits say. Some people were rather shocked, but Frodo kept up the custom of giving Bilbo's birthday party year after year until they got used to it. He said that he did not think Bilbo was dead. When they asked, "Where is he then?" he shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, like completely uninterested in answering the questions. He clearly doesn't believe that Bilbo is dead, but completely uninterested in answering the question or telling people that no, that he is actually alive. Like, I don't know where he is, but I'm sure he's okay. He lived alone as Bilbo had done, but he had a good many friends, especially among the younger hobbits, mostly descendants of the old Took, who had as children been fond of Bilbo and often in and out of Bag End. Folko Boffin and Fredegar Bolger were two of these, but his closest friends were Peregrine Took, usually called Pippin, and Merry Brandybuck. His real name was Meriadoc, but that was seldom remembered. Frodo went tramping over the Shire with them, but more often he wandered by himself, and to the amazement of sensible folk, he was sometimes seen far from home walking in the hills and woods under the starlight. Merry and Pippin suspected that he visited the elves at times, as Bilbo had done. As time went on, people began to notice that Frodo also showed signs of good preservation. Outwardly, he retained the appearance of a robust and energetic hobbit just out of his tweens. Some folk have all the luck, they said, but it was not until Frodo approached the usually more sober age of 50 that they began to think it queer. Right? This is Hobbit 50. Hobbits live a bit longer. So let's say that Bilbo was, I don't know, that he was in man years 35, but he still looked 18 or 20, kind of a Timothy Chalamet kind of thing going on, something like that. Frodo himself, after the first shock, found that being his own master and the Mr. Baggins of Bag End was rather pleasant. For some years, he was quite happy and did not worry much about the future. But half unknown to himself, the regret that he had not gone with Bilbo was steadily growing. He found himself wondering at times, especially in the autumn, about the wild lands and strange visions of mountains that he had never seen came into his dreams. Of mountains that he had never seen, sorry, came into his dreams. He began to say to himself, "Perhaps I shall cross the river myself one day," to which the other half of his mind always replied, "Not yet." Visions. Visions. Yes? It doesn't say uh, dreams. It says that visions came into his dreams. They are called visions. They're not called just dreams. It's not that he dreamt of mountains he had never seen. Visions of mountains that he had never seen came into his dreams. Also, he had never seen mountains at all, right? You can kind of imagine them, maybe, but I don't think you can imagine them very well if you have never seen them. Like we are used, like we come from a different time, right? We have internet, but even before that, we had TV, right? Or even photographs. I'm not sure how many mountains has Frodo seen. Maybe paintings. It's possible that he's seen paintings of mountains. Maybe paintings of the Lonely Mountain or something. I don't know. Or of the what is it? The Blue Mountains are the ones. I don't remember right now. I think it's the Blue Mountains, the ones that are where Thorin's Hall is, where Thorin and the dwarves that escaped the Lonely Mountain ended up making a home. But I'm not really sure if he's actually seen them. So where would he? How would he know what mountains are like? Right? These are visions of mountains. Where do these visions come from? One could say the ring. This is Mount Doom that he's dreaming about, maybe. I don't think so. I don't know where the visions are coming from. Um, but they might not be the work of the ring. There are other powers at play in Middle Earth. And we will see that there are powers. Um, for one, there are the Valar, which are like the gods, right? And they don't interfere per se, but they do act, yeah. And then there is, let's say, the creator itself, Iluvatar. Uh, is he doing this? I don't think so, but he's another power that is there. Yes. So there are powers that exist beyond the ones that we read about or we know about, beyond Gandalf, beyond Sauron, even, right? Um, I'm not saying exactly which of these powers is giving Frodo the strange visions, but something is, or someone. So it went on until his 40s were running out and his 50th birthday was drawing near. 50 was a number that he felt was somehow significant or ominous. It was at any rate at that age that adventure had suddenly befallen Bilbo. Frodo began to feel restless, and the old paths seemed too well trodden. He looked at maps and wondered what lay beyond their edges. Maps made in the Shire showed mostly white spaces beyond its borders. He took to wandering further afield and more often by himself, and Merry and his other friends watched him anxiously. Often he was seen walking and talking with the strange wayfarers that began at this time to appear in the Shire. Okay, we have strange wayfarers, strange wanderers, right? That started to appear in the Shire. Who are they? Are they hobbits from Bree? Are they dwarves? Maybe we know that dwarves sometimes did cross the Shire. Uh, I don't know, but they began appear at this time at the Shire. Yeah, so we start to get um, kind of an ominous feeling here. Yes. There were rumors of strange things happening in the world outside, and as Gandalf had not at that time appeared or sent any message for several years, Frodo gathered all the news he could. Elves, who seldom walked in the Shire, could now be seen passing westward through the woods in the evening, passing and not returning. But they were leaving Middle Earth and were no longer concerned with its troubles. There were, however, dwarves on the road in unusual numbers. Here are the dwarves. So the wayfarers from before are probably not the dwarves or the elves. They're men, hobbits. I don't know. Um, the ancient east-west road ran through the Shire to its end at the Grey Havens, and dwarves had always used it on their way to their mines in the Blue Mountains. I was right; it was the Blue Mountains. They were the hobbits' chief source of news from distant parts, if they wanted any. As a rule, dwarves said little and hobbits asked no more. But now Frodo often met strange dwarves of far countries, seeking refuge in the west. They were troubled, and some spoke in whispers of the enemy and of the land of Mordor. Enemy with a capital E. And the land of Mordor. This is the first time that it's mentioned in the book, but not quite. It's actually uh, mentioned in the poem, right? Remember the poem with which the book starts? I'm going to read it from the actual book here. Yeah, I've got the actual book. The poem with which the book starts says, 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. This is the poem that opens the book, right? It's the very beginning of the book. So we had read about Mordor here. We don't know what it is. We know that that's where the shadows lie. We know that's where the 1 ring can bring them all and in the darkness bind them, right? So we know it's probably not a very good place, right? Probably not a very nice place. They say that 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Yeah. Another thing, shadows is capitalized. Yes, it's shadows with a capital S. So what are these shadows with a capital S? I don't know. They're not good for sure. Yeah. So we heard of Mordor before, but now is the first time that they mention Mordor in the actual narrative, right? They were troubled and some spoke in whispers, so they don't even dare say it out loud. But they're escaping from it, right? They're seeking refuge in the west. That means that they are coming from the east, right? So we already know that trouble lies on the east. Um, that name the hobbits only knew in legends of the dark past, like a shadow in the background of their memories. But it was ominous and disquieting. It seemed that the evil power of Mirkwood had been driven out by the White Council, only to reappear in greater strength in the old strongholds of Mordor. You see, this is a reference to something that happens in The Hobbit, but we don't really know exactly what happens. We know that Gandalf at one point goes off to fight or to cast off the necromancer. We see that there is a necromancer in Mirkwood, and at the end of the Hobbit, it seems that they cast the necromancer out, and that it's the Mirkwood is going to now be named the Greenwood, and like everything's going to be great. But no, it was driven out of Mirkwood, but it reappeared in greater strength now in the old strongholds of Mordor. So we don't know what this is. We don't know exactly who is the enemy, but we do know very quickly that this is just not good news. Yeah. The Dark Tower had been rebuilt, it was said. Very heavy metal name, but again, not very friendly. From there, the power was spreading far and wide. And away far east and south, there were wars and growing fear. Orcs were multiplying again in the mountains. Trolls were abroad, no longer dull witted, but cunning and armed with dreadful weapons. The trolls that we met in the Hobbit are quite dumb, right? So he says now they're smarter and they're armed with dreadful weapons. Yes, I don't know what are these dreadful weapons. And there were murmured hints of creatures more terrible than all these, but they had no name. Okay, so this passage the beginning tells you that Frodo kept celebrating, but he was feeling restless, right? There's a feeling that things are not okay, and then all the rumors. Yes, we know that hobbits love gossip in general, but they didn't ask a lot to the dwarves. They don't like this kind of gossip. They like cheap gossip. They like to gossip about, the people in the Shire and what they've been up to. They don't like gossiping about dark lords and trouble in the east. Yeah. Um, Little of all these, of course, see, here you go, reached the ears of ordinary hobbits. But even the deafest and most stay at home began to hear queer tales. And those whose business took them to the borders saw strange things. The conversation in the Green Dragon at Bywater one evening in the spring of Frodo's 50th year showed that even in the comfortable heart of the Shire, rumors had been heard, though most hobbits still laughed at them. Sam Gamgee was sitting in one corner near the fire, and opposite him was Ted Sandyman, the miller's son. And there were various other rustic hobbits listening to their talk. You see, so this is like another generation. We saw in the previous chapter the Sandyman, the miller, and Ham Gamgee, right, who is Sam's father. So now it's Sam and Ted Sandyman, the son of the miller, yes, with other rustic hobbits, right? They're not upper class hobbits like Bilbo, like Frodo, well, Bilbo as well, or like Merry and Pippin, that Frodo's friends. These are the working class hobbits. Yeah. Queer things you do here these days, to be sure, said Sam. Ah, said Ted. You do if you listen. But I can hear fireside tales and children's stories at home if I want to. So Ted has heard these things as well. He just decided not to. He decides that they're not important, right? He decides not to pay attention. Um, he's kind of a denier of all this news. Yeah. No doubt you can, retorted Sam. And I say there's more truth in some of them than you reckon. Who invented the stories anyway? Take dragons now. Sam trying to come up with uh, a good argument in his favor. He says, yeah, well, you can ignore them, but there is a reason they exist. They didn't appear out of nowhere. Who invented the stories? Like, where do they come from? Right? He says, take dragons now, right? To say, okay, we know dragons exist. No, thank you, said Ted. Thank you, right? Thank you. I won't. I heard tell of them when I was a youngster, but there's no call to believe in them now. There's only one dragon in Bywater, and that's green, he said, getting a general laugh, right? The green dragon is the pub, the bar, pub, I think is a good word, where they are. All right, said Sam, laughing with the rest. But what about these tree men, these giants, as you might call them? They do say that one bigger than a tree was seen up away beyond the North Moors not long back. Who's they? Right? He doesn't believe. It's okay. Anyway, on this side so far, like I'm not going to say I'm on Ted Sandyman's side, but this is an excellent question. When somebody tells you they say, yes, well, who are they? But Sam has a good answer. Make us in Hal for one, he says. He works for Mr. Buffin at Overhill and goes up to the North Farding for the hunting. He saw one. Says he did, perhaps. Your Hal's always saying he's seen things, or maybe he sees things that ain't there, right? Accusing him of, I don't know, hallucinating or I don't know. But this one was as big as an elm tree and walking 7 yards to a stride if it was an inch. Then I bet it wasn't an inch. What he saw was an elm tree, as like as not. But this one was walking, I tell you. And there ain't no elm tree on the North Moors. Then Hal can't have seen one, said Ted. There was some laughing and clapping. The audience seemed to think that Ted had scored a point. I kind of agree. It's very good reasoning on Hal's side. If you are a hobbit and you've never seen any of these things, they're very distant. Um, However, it does seem like Ted is making, like Hal, no, Ted, sorry, is making a special effort to deny these things, right? His argument is good, but this is Middle Earth. This isn't the city of Buenos Aires in 2024, where we're going to say dragons. Come on, right? A walking tree. What are you talking about? This is the Shire in Middle Earth. Freaky stuff goes on over there, man. I mean, there are orcs, and everybody knows that there are orcs, that they exist. Actually, the hobbits in the distant past, but it's still recorded in their history. They fought orcs, right? They had to. So they do know that some of these things are real. Bilbo had an encounter with a dragon. Some of them might not believe Bilbo, but they have an actual How about now? I've been reading for how many minutes without audio? For 10 minutes? My God. Okay. What a disaster. I was reading my heart out here. I was really reading my heart out. And there was no audio. Um, okay. So, shall I backtrack? I said a lot of things in this last 10 minutes. Um, I don't know where I was, but I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to do it since there was no audio. Yeah. Um, Augusto, do you know what was the last thing that I said? If you're still there, when you still heard, or I have been reading without audio for who knows how long? It's a good question. Let me take a second to double check that, and then I'll be right here with um, checking what was the last thing that had audio here. Yeah, give me just a moment. Okay, yeah, don't say it because I just checked and I saw that I read for the last I don't know how long without thing. It was on the screen. You know what it was. Uh, this sucks, but this is live and shit happens when you're live, right? So this is uh, the shit that happened when I was live. I'm gonna summarize. I'm not gonna read everything again because that would be. I mean, you probably at least could follow on the screen. But I am gonna say some of the things that I talked about. Yeah. So in the last I don't know 15 minutes maybe or 20 minutes, um, we went from reading about the hobbits, yes, and about Sam and Ted Sandyman and Ted Sandyman's disbelief. Ted Sandyman doesn't want to believe things that are obviously real, right? In the sense that this is Middle Earth. This isn't I don't know, our world, right? So when you talk about dragons and you say, nah, dragons don't exist, well, there is actual evidence of dragons, right? So on the one hand, that yes, that even though Ted Sandyman's arguments look perfectly reasonable when he says, now that can't be, right? This isn't our world. This is a world with elves and orcs and trolls and things like that we know exist. So he doesn't want to know about these things. He doesn't want to believe these things because obviously life is a lot easier if there aren't any dragons, right? So that was one thing. And then I went on to read about Gandalf, yeah, um, and Gandalf's arrival after 9 years. Okay, so um, for 9 years, but it's been total 17 years since Bilbo's disappearance, if I'm not wrong, and it's been 80 years since Bilbo found the ring. Okay, um, so the key here is that Gandalf shows up, right, and he talks to Frodo and begins to finally tell Frodo the things that he knows. Um, and Frodo asks him, like, "How long have you known?" And Gandalf doesn't want to answer. First, he talks about and did Bilbo know? And Gandalf answers about Bilbo, but he doesn't answer how long he has known. And then Frodo has to ask again, "How long have you known?" And then Gandalf tells him this thing like, known? I've known things that only the wise know. I forgot. He's basically beating around the bush. He doesn't want to tell Frodo that he's known for quite a long time that Frodo has a very dangerous thing in his hands. Yes. Um, he started suspecting the same year that Bilbo got the ring. That's 80 years ago. Okay, that he started suspecting at least that it was one of the great rings. Um, and it's There aren't that many great rings. Yeah. They're in the poem that I read, and you probably didn't hear, but the poem that is, I'm going to read it now again. That is 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord and his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness find them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. So how many rings we have? We have 3 rings for the elven kings, right? These are the great rings, are the ones that are mentioned in the poem. It's not one of the 3. Gandalf knows that. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. Okay, maybe. 9 for the mortal men doomed to die. Gandalf has to know that it's not possible that it's any of them. Or 1 ring to rule them all. Yeah. So if Gandalf has known for 80 years that this is one of the great rings, and if Gandalf knows it's not one of the 3, and is very likely not one of the 9, might be one of the 7 or the 1. Let's say there's a big chance that this can be the 1 ring. At least 1 in 8, let's say, which is, considering the danger, I would say they're not good odds for Bilbo and Frodo, right? And Gandalf has known this for a very long time, and yet he has allowed Bilbo to have the ring, to pass it on to Frodo, and Frodo to keep it without saying anything. That's why I say, is Gandalf kind of a dick here? Yes? Is he being a dick? Has he been a dick to Frodo and to Bilbo? A little, yes. A little, yes. Definitely, right? Because he's known that. Yes. He talked about all this, and then here, yes. I have known much that only the wise know. And then he finally talks about it. He says all this, right? That it was plainly a great ring. The lies, and then this. Yeah, this is just a little before I finally saw that I didn't have any audio. There was little else that I could do. I could not take him from him without doing greater harm, and I had no right to do so anyway. This without doing greater harm. Without doing greater harm refers to not. I mean, yeah, sure, not doing greater harm to Bilbo than the ring was already doing, but also imagine if Gandalf had taken the ring by force from Bilbo. And imagine that now Gandalf is the one that holds the 1 ring. And imagine that his first act to take the ring was to take it by force. Yes. It's going to be said, I don't know exactly where, but it's going to be said later that Bilbo's first act was an act of mercy. He could have killed Gollum, and he didn't. He pitied Gollum. And this is a key point in the whole story, right? So part of the reason why Bilbo had such a resistance to the ring was that he didn't use it in a nasty way, and he didn't start his life, his possession of the ring, with murder, but with pity, right? So imagine if Gandalf had used force to take the ring, and then he had possessed the ring after taking it by force. We're talking about Gandalf here, okay? Fucking Gandalf, okay? So probably not a very good idea, and Gandalf knew this. So it was better to just let Bilbo keep it. Yeah, he didn't have any better alternatives, but at the same time, yeah, he was kind of a dick because he never told Bilbo, right? And then he says, now we're reaching that point. That's the summary of the last, I don't know, 20 minutes. So the point is, yes, Gandalf is a dick, but for good reason. Yes, basically. It's better to keep the ring with Bilbo and with Frodo in the Shire, where nobody else knows that the ring is safe and where Gandalf knows where it is, right? Than having the ring, I don't know, wander around or be in possession of somebody more dangerous than Bilbo Baggins or Frodo Baggins. So, yeah, but with good reason. He didn't really have, or he didn't really come up with any better alternative than just keeping the ring safe. And keeping it safe meant not telling them about it. Could he have told them, hey, you have this ring, you better keep it safe? Yeah, he could have. But then maybe they would have panicked, right? So he decided to hide that from them. Still, I would get pretty mad if I were Frodo. Frodo is a nice guy. He didn't get mad. I would have gotten pretty mad at Gandalf for that. Okay, so I'll resume from where I left off. I could only watch and wait. I might perhaps have consulted Saruman the White, but something always held me back. Who is he? Asked Frodo. I have never heard of him before. Maybe not, answered Gandalf. Hobbits are, or were, no concern of his. Yet he is great among the wise. He is the chief of my order and the head of the council. His knowledge is deep, but his pride has grown with it, and he takes ill any meddling. The lore of the Elven Rings, great and small, is his province. He has long studied it, seeking the lost secrets of their making. But when the rings were debated in the council, all that he would reveal to us of his ring lord told against my fears. So my doubts slept, but uneasily. Still, I watched and I waited. Gandalf trusts Saruman. He believes actually that Saruman knows more than him. And if Saruman told him no, it's impossible that the one ring is lost. Um, Gandalf kind of believed that, right? Or rested on that. Maybe he wanted to believe that the One Ring was lost because if the One Ring is found, man, that's trouble. That's a hassle. Yeah, I know that that's kind of the reason Gandalf is there, but he probably doesn't want to have to deal with it unless he really has to, right? Um, so, and all seemed well with Bilbo. And the years passed. Yes, they passed, and they seemed not to touch him. He showed no signs of age. The shadow fell on me again, but I said to myself, after all, he comes of a long lived family on his mother's side. There is time yet. Wait. Again, trying to convince himself. By now, I think he's got plenty of evidence, right? And I waited until that night when he left his house. He said and did things then that filled me with fear that no words of Saruman could allay. I knew at last that something dark and deadly was at work, and I have spent most of the years since then in finding out the truth of it. 17 years at least that he's known with pretty much certainty. There wasn't any permanent harm done, was there? Asked Frodo anxiously. He would get all right in time, wouldn't he? Be able to rest in peace, I mean? This is touching. Frodo worries more about Bilbo than himself. He felt better at once, said Gandalf. But there is only one power in this world that knows all about the rings and their effects. And as far as I know, there is no power in the world that knows all about hobbits. Among the wise, I am the only one that goes in for hobbit lore, an obscure branch of knowledge, but full of surprises. Soft as butter they can be, and yet sometimes as tough as old tree roots. I think it likely that some would resist the rings far longer than most of the wise would believe. I don't think you need worry about Bilbo. Of course, he possessed the ring for many years and used it, so it might take a long while for the influence to wear off. Before it was safe for him to see it again, for instance. Otherwise, he might live on for years quite happily, just stop as he was when he parted with it, for he gave it up in the end of his own accord, an important point. No, I was not troubled about dear Bilbo anymore when he had let the thing go. It is for you that I feel responsible, and well you should, Gandalf, and well you should, because yeah, you played a nasty one on poor Frodo. Um, you know, I didn't realize that Gandalf was a dick before when I first read it, but then I saw it, and it's not the only time that he's a dick. Again, he's always a dick with a good reason, with good motives. Yes, but he does manipulate people when he needs to. That's kind of his thing. Yeah, he inspires, but he is kind of manipulative. As I said, yeah, sure, with good reason, and he worries about people, but if he needs to use someone, he'll do it, I guess. Ever since Bilbo left, I have been deeply concerned about you and about all these charming, absurd, helpless hobbits. It would be a grievous blow to the world if the dark power overcame the Shire. If all your kind, jolly, stupid bolgers, hornblowers, boffins, brace girdles, and the rest, not to mention the ridiculous Bagginses, became enslaved. Name calling is maybe not required, but he doesn't mean that. That's not I don't think he's trying to be mean here. Um, Frodo shuddered. But why should we be? He asked. And why should he want such slaves? Eh, I, I get it. Like why hobbits would probably make very crappy slaves, right? Um, but Gandalf doesn't answer. He says, "To tell you the truth," replied Gandalf, "I believe that hitherto, mark you, he has entirely overlooked the existence of hobbits. You should be thankful, but your safety has passed. He does not need you. He has many more useful servants, but he won't forget you again. And hobbits as miserable slaves would please him far more than hobbits happy and free. There is such a thing as malice and revenge." "Revenge," said Frodo. "Revenge for what? I still don't understand what all of this has to do with Bilbo and myself and our ring." "It has everything to do with it," said Gandalf. "You do not know the real peril yet, but you shall. I was not sure of it myself when I was last here, but the time has come to speak. Give me the ring for a moment." Okay. Um, Another thing that is different from the movies, right? Frodo gives him the ring voluntarily when Gandalf asks. Yes. Um, the effects of the ring are not such that like you can't give it to someone for a second, or as long as you don't believe that they're going to take it from you, and as long as the other person is not claiming possession of the ring, it's not so terrible to touch. It's not like in the movie that Gandalf just touches the envelope, or doesn't even dare touch it. He like wants to touch the envelope and gets this fire ring image. Like, wow, that doesn't, it's not like that, right? It's not so. You have to actually own the ring. You have to claim ownership of the ring, and you have to give up the ring like Bilbo did, not just give it to someone for a second, like it's happening here. Yeah. Frodo took it from his breeches pocket, where it was clasped to a chain that hung from his belt. He unfastened it and handed it slowly to the wizard. It felt suddenly very heavy, as if either it or Frodo himself was in some way reluctant for Gandalf to touch it. Reluctant, but not, you know, he gave it anyway. He gave it up anyway. Gandalf held it up. Gandalf has it in his hand. He held it up. Yes. It looked to be made of pure and solid gold. "Can you see any markings of it?" he asked. "No," said Frodo, "there are none. It is quite plain, and it never shows a scratch or sign of wear." "Well, then, look." To Frodo's astonishment and distress, the wizard threw its saddle into the middle of a glowing corner of the fire. Frodo gave a cry and groped for the tongs, but Gandalf held him back. The tongs, you know what they are? They're the like the tweezers that you use to move the coal and uh, to get something from the fire. Those are the tongs. Yes, like big tweezers. Um, "Wait," he said in a commanding voice, giving Frodo a quick look from under his bristling brows. No apparent change came over the ring. After a while, Gandalf got up, closed the shutters outside a window, and drew the curtains. The room became dark and silent, though the clack of Sam's shears, now nearer to the windows, could still be heard faintly from the garden. For a moment the wizard stood looking at the fire. Then he stooped and removed the ring to the hearth with the tongs, and at once picked it up. Frodo gasped. "It is quite cool," said Gandalf. "Take it." Frodo received it on his shrinking palm. It seemed to have become thicker and heavier than ever. "Hold it up," said Gandalf, "and look closely." As Frodo did so, he now saw fine lines, finer than the finest pen strokes, running along the ring, outside and inside. Lines of fire that seemed to form the letters of a flowing script. Then they shone piercingly bright and yet remote, as if out of a great depth. This is the inscription, right? "I cannot read the fire letters," said Frodo in a quavering voice. "No," said Gandalf, "but I can. The letters are Elvish, of an ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here. But this in the common tongue is what is said, close enough. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them." It is only two lines of the verse long known in elven lore, and now again the verse is repeated, but here. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. A couple of things about this poem. Um, First, there is a great poetic resource here in terms of metric, that in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie is a different metric from 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. It is breaking the metric of the poem. And that's what makes this line heavier. It gives it more weight. Yes. Um, so on the one hand, from the point of view of poetry, let's say, the breaking of the metric is what gives this line that is also repeated twice particularly strong. Yeah. And then another thing, this is not said here, this is said, I think, in the Silmarillion, that when Sauron made the One Ring, Celebrimbor, the other great elven smith that actually taught or learned from Sauron how to make rings and who made the 3 rings, um, heard Sauron chant or say these words as he was forging the ring, which makes me think that this is not just a poem. It might be a kind of incantation. Yes, it might be that when he recited these things as he was crafting the ring, it was an incantation placed on the ring. Yeah. Okay. A little bit more we're going to read today. He paused and then said slowly in a deep voice, "This is the master ring, the one ring to rule them all. This is the one ring that he lost many ages ago to the great weakening of his power. He greatly desires it, but he must not get it." Frodo sat silent and motionless. Fear seemed to stretch out a vast hand, like a dark cloud rising in the east and looming up to engulf him. "This ring," he stammered. "How on earth did it come to me?" I'd imagine that you're just a hobbit, right? You're just a you live in an important country, uh, in a place where nothing really happens, right? These tales of, even the tales of dragons that we know exist, are discarded by many of the people in this place because they don't believe they're real. They believe they're just legends, right? Even though these are things that, like, a dragon existed until 80 years ago. The last of the dragons was over there in the Misty Mountains and in the Lonely Mountain, and dwarves would go along that road. Actually, the dwarves that escaped from that dragon had moved not that long ago, I don't know, 100 years ago or something like that, but not that long ago, to the west, to the Blue Mountains, and yet they pretend these things don't exist. So imagine the surprise of finding in such a place that you own a weapon of mass destruction, right? It's like, I don't know, um, an atomic bomb, right? You thought it was a cell phone, and it was actually an atomic bomb or something. Said Gandalf, that is a very long story. And here we have, actually, I think this is a good moment to stop for today, because if I start now reading the story of the ring, look at how many pages I would have to read before I'm able to stop. Yeah. So I'm sorry for the sound issue that we had before. Shit happens. But I think it's better if we stop here, because as I say, if I start with the rest, I'm gonna be here until midnight or more. So we'll call it a day here. And next session, hopefully checking that the microphone is working a bit more often. Um, I'm gonna read about the story of the ring. Yeah. Before going there, something that is not about what I read, but I wanted to talk about this for a minute. I read a couple of articles online. I don't know if you found them, that apparently, like, the far right, the fascists, especially in Italy, like, are using the Lord of the Rings as they're taking it as a kind of fascist manifesto or something. Like, they take it as they quote it and they take it as something on their side. We saw some of that here in Argentina with Macri calling people orcs, right? I don't think he was along the same intellectual lines. I don't think he's ever read the book. I don't think he has the ability to read such a difficult book. But he said it right. So there is this idea that they are the forces of good, right, against the forces of evil. Maybe it's that simplistic narrative of good versus evil that the reason why they take it. But it's clear that they don't understand anything, right? It's clear that they don't get it. Um, they they don't get what Tolkien is celebrating when he celebrates hobbits, and when he celebrates the more simple hobbits. When the real bigger, the probably one of the biggest heroes of the story is Sam. Yes, um, hobbits are uninterested in glory or power, right? Definitely, hobbits are, even though they are they have social classes. Yes, um, hobbits are not particularly oppressive. They don't want to exercise their power over others, right? Um, and they're the most celebrated people here. It's not the king, the one that is the most celebrated, even though it appears so. It's not really the power of the king, the one that wins. Yes. So on the one hand, is you should take a look at hobbits to see what Tolkien is considering important here, and you will see that these values are quite different from the values of the far right. Uh, Another thing is that um, Tolkien was kind of an anti-industrialist, right? Saruman and in we're gonna see in Isengard and Sauron in Mordor are industrial powers, yes, and he celebrates an agrarian society in front of these industrial powers, yes. So all the people that believe in capital and progress and exploiting nature and all these things, which are typical of the far right. Uh, Not only though, it's typical of capitalism actually, but all this exploitation of nature, all of this considering everything property. Yes, and the idea of that private property is absolute. This is not what Tolkien is talking about at all. Yeah, so typical of these people to not understand what they read. Yes, it's like the far right people that watch Star Wars and they don't realize that they are the Empire and that the heroes are actually terrorists. Yes, or not terrorists, but they're a guerrilla organization, right? um I'm sure the far right would call them terrorists. So these people don't understand what they read and they don't understand what they see, and that's why they celebrate the Lord of the Rings. Of course, there is the point, yes, I will take it off, the everyone is white and the orcs are described as maybe darker skinned, but not that much. First, because this happens in a pseudo European place, so everybody's kind of white. But also, hobbits are many hobbits are brown skinned, and they all have dark hair. So again, there is a misreading of the Lord of the Rings in which people project things that they want to project on the Lord of the Rings, and that's not really what the book is saying. Sometimes you have to read a bit more closely. Yes, and if you read more closely, you see that things are not what you think they are. Like Gandalf is a dick, and people don't believe that Gandalf is a dick. He kind of is for good reason. I know. Like I support him, but you need to read the text more closely, and we need to understand what we read. Otherwise, we're just projecting on literature and disrespecting a work of literature by being fascist idiots. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say to end this, because when I read that article, I felt personally offended that this group of fascist assholes would think that Tolkien is on their side. I'm not saying Tolkien was on my side either, um, but probably closer to mine than theirs. So, well, anyway, we're gonna get on to reading the Lord of the Rings, the end of chapter 2, next week, where we're gonna continue with the story of the ring. Yeah, the Gandalf is gonna tell the whole history of the ring in a very short way. So we're going to read that next class. Thank you, the ones that joined. If you are one of the people that are watching this later, I hope you didn't leave um, when the sound was cut off. And I will see you, I hope, or you will see me, because I'm not seeing any of you actually, next week. Yeah. So take care. And with that thunder that is cracking the sky, I say goodbye.